What this digital transformation mandate is about is a fundamental issue of corporate survival, whether you want to be on the train or whether you want to be on the tracks.
We're trying to think about new visions, new models, new methods, and how we use technology, including AI, to enable our people to create value and to deliver results for our customers and for the company.
The potential for the ways that sort of science and automation can change the entire world is really mind-bending. The options are limitless.
You need to understand the data you have available is a core product that you have. It is value. And in order to realize that value, you need to understand how to leverage that.
This is a very large-scale effort. It's extraordinarily challenging. We're working with some of the largest companies in the world, and we're making the world a better place.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the C3 AI webinar series. My name is Caton. I'm a Senior Associate Outbound Product Manager at C3 AI, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm excited to be joined by Lila Fridley and Justin Kendig. Lila Fridley will introduce the C3 AI Supply Chain Suite and C3 Generative AI for supply chain, and Justin Kendig will help demonstrate C3 Generative AI as part of C3 AI Supply Network Risk. Before we get started, I do want to point out that we have a Q&A window. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to drop those in. Our team will either help answer them through chat or at the live Q&A at the end. Thank you again for joining us. And with that, I will hand it over to Lila.
Thank you, Caton. I'm thrilled today to get to discuss with you our C3 AI Supply Chain Suite, as well as some exciting new innovation of applying generative AI for supply chain software. So I'll start by introducing our Supply Chain Suite, which is an end-to-end family of enterprise AI applications for supply chain planning and execution. Our applications cover use cases from sourcing optimization to improve procurement decisions, demand forecasting with granular and accurate demand forecasts, production schedule optimization, which drives efficiency in manufacturing production, C3 AI inventory optimization to improve inventory service levels and reduce inventory holding costs, and C3 AI Supply Network Risk, which identifies risks in advance of order delays from suppliers and going out to customers. And I'm really excited that we have Justin joining us later today to show a demo of C3 AI Supply Network Risk with C3 Generative AI. One thing that is really important and foundational to all of our supply chain applications is the C3 Supply Chain Digital Twin. The Supply Chain Digital Twin provides a granular and timed history of all of the supply chain operations and all of the data flowing in from various ERPs, from other enterprise data sources, and from external data feeds. The C3 Supply Chain Digital Twin integrates disparate ERP systems, whether that's Oracle, SAP, or other systems, and unifies them into a common digital view of all of your data across your supply chain. This means that if you're using different ERPs across the world, across different business units, or if you've invested in different systems over time, our Supply Chain Digital Twin is unifying all of that information, all of that transactional data, and making it a time series, time history of all of the different movements across your supply chain. That includes the history of demand forecasts, of order movements, sales histories, inventory, supplier relationships. All of the traditional transactional data is represented in the Supply Chain Digital Twin. On top of that, we unify other enterprise data sources. So that could be coming from things like your CRM, from your marketing systems, so that you're building out the context of what's going on in your business, not just looking at the transactional records. And finally, as any supply chain professional knows, you don't operate your supply chain in a vacuum. The world outside is really affecting the business decisions that you're making. And so our Supply Chain Digital Twin comes pre-piped with external data feeds that track things like weather, as well as macroeconomic data like market indices, supplier financial risk ratings, vessel movements, and port traffic. So all of this contextual information is providing the complete visibility you need to know in order to manage your supply chain and make predictive decisions, not just reactive decisions. Some of the key differentiators of our Supply Chain Digital Twin and our Supply Chain Suite Again, as I mentioned, it is innately a predictive software suite. We no longer have to manage supply chains based on what happened last week or what are emerging issues today, but instead our applications are providing predictive and granular insights about what risks are coming and what is likely to change, what are the optimal decision parameters in order to account for that uncertainty. We provide global visibility at a very granular level with part-level tracking across the entire supply chain. It's very flexible to be able to apply different types of AI models. I'll talk in a second about how we apply generative AI and the generative models, but we also apply various forms of forecasting models, unsupervised learning, supervised learning, very flexible to any kind of AI. Every single application provides a complete workflow for the different types of users across the supply chain. That could be demand planners, inventory managers, supplier relationship managers, procurement managers, all of the different people that are involved in supply chain decisions have very specialized and tailored workflows within our supply chain applications. And finally, we have scalable AI. We work with some of the largest organizations across the globe, whether that's in aerospace and defense, oil and gas, retail and CPG, manufacturing, and healthcare. Our customers are deploying the C3 AI supply chain suite in order to improve their business outcomes on a daily basis. Now, I mentioned I'm really excited to share some exciting new innovation around how we apply generative AI for the supply chain. Our generative AI product was launched last year based on customer feedback and the request to say, how do I have Google for my enterprise? How can I quickly access all of that enterprise information that you are unifying for my applications that in that supply chain digital twin across all of the various databases and information sources that we integrate into C3, make the users more efficient and give them access to the information they need in order to make better business decisions. So this is the AI-powered knowledge assistant that we are applying across all of our different customer deployments, and we are embedding into our various applications. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes the C3 generative AI capability different than standard LLMs. As everyone on the planet is aware of today, LLMs and generative AI are taking enterprises by storm. And like many of you, I too use generative models to make myself more efficient. But these generative models have some downsides and some risks. The standard architecture is that a user, either a business user or someone who is using one of these models for personal use, interacts with the LLM in a chat-like interface. They could pose a question, they could ask for a travel itinerary. And when that LLM is coming up with the response, it's actually searching and querying and is trained on all of the available data to that LLM. In most cases, the LLM actually has access to text documents, to HTML, which is websites, and in some cases to code. We've seen examples of that where employees are starting to use these LLMs to help them write boilerplate code. But when they do that, it exposes these companies to a fair amount of risk. First is that the responses that the LLM is generating are random. If I ask the same question twice, I'm going to get 2 different answers. And many of you have probably experienced this in your personal use. Second is there's no traceability. The LLM is trained on the data, but it doesn't have a way to identify what data is actually being used to generate its response. And so that means that as a user, I have no idea where this answer is coming from. Do I trust the data source? Do I know what the ground truth is? And in the standard architecture, it does not. Third is there's no enterprise access controls. I may be limited in the type of data I have access to as a business user. I may sit, right now I'm sitting in California. I really shouldn't have access to data based out of Europe, for example. But the standard LLM architecture has no way to protect the data privacy to make sure that the right users have access to the right information and no information leakage is happening. Speaking of information leakage, this is a major concern for our enterprise customers where they do not want to have their private data exposed to competitors, to the broader internet. Again, this is something we're seeing playing out in the news right now, where some users have already copied and pasted private IP into these LLMs in order to make themselves more efficient, but now it's exposing their organizations to massive IP risk because their source IP, their code, their privacy is being exposed to the entire internet. And finally, these models are prone to hallucination. If I ask a question that the LLM doesn't know the answer to, the standard architecture does not provide any controls on that model to prevent it from making up an answer. What it thinks is the next best word in a sentence is going to predict that is the right answer to my question. There's no way for it to know whether or not it actually has the right answer because it doesn't have the ability to trace down to ground truth. The C3 Generative AI Architecture is really different. What we do is we protect the LLM from the raw data. So I'm going to walk through this architecture from the top. We incorporate the unstructured data files like you would with a standard LLM, so text, HTML, and code. But we also incorporate structured data. Now, this is unique because standard LLMs are only looking at text files. We're incorporating the structured data that we integrate into, for example, the supply chain digital twin into the application object model, like tables, application data, sensor data, log files, transaction data. All of that is represented in the supply chain digital twin, but the LLM does not have access to that data itself. Instead, we apply a knowledge embedding, and the LLM only has access to the retrieval model. So when a user asks a question either in chat form or in search form, say, how much inventory do I have at my distribution center? The LLM is interpreting that question and converting it into a query that it passes through to the retrieval model. And the retrieval model is what has access to the data itself. In that way, we are providing a layer of security to protect against the risks of the standard architecture. So what that means is our answers are deterministic because they are based on the data. The LLM is only interpreting the answer and returning the result in a human readable format in a chat-like interface. But the actual response is coming from that vector store, coming from the retrieval model. And so it is deterministic. If you asked, how much inventory do I have at my distribution center? If you phrase that question differently, or if two different users ask it on 2 different days, as long as they have access to that information through the access controls and the data protection, then they'll get the same response. We have full traceability because we know exactly where the response is coming from through the retrieval model. So that means that you know exactly what the ground truth is. And as a user, I can go follow up and make sure that I agree that this is the right answer. As you'll see later in the demo from Justin, we have a Google-like interface. So the user can interface with the chat model, but then we surface the ground truth results and they can click into the underlying either enterprise data source, the planning software, or the C3 AI application where that information is coming from. We apply the full enterprise access controls. I'll walk through this at a high level in a second, but basically this means that given our 10 years plus in enterprise AI applications and handling unified aggregated data at scale, we have a lot of experience with enterprises that need to protect their data even within their organization. So if one user sitting in California has different data access than a different user sitting in London, we respect those data privacy controls. We do not suffer from LLM-caused leakage of proprietary information because, again, the LLM does not have access to the data itself. Furthermore, we host this either in a C3-hosted cloud environment or a customer-hosted cloud environment, so it's not exposed to the rest of the internet. But even still, the LLM itself is not accessing the data, and therefore it's not learning, it's not being able to take those insights and then surface them to a different user. And finally, there's no hallucination. Again, because the LLM is simply playing the role of understanding the user's question and providing the response in a human readable format, it's not actually coming up with the answer itself. The retrieval model is finding the answer. And in that way, if there's no response, if a user asks a question, who's the King of England? Well, your enterprise data doesn't have the answer to that question. And so in that way, there's no response. And so the retrieval model will not be able to surface any data to that question, and the LLM will simply respond, there's no response to this question. So how is this making people more efficient? That's really the name of the game with generative AI and the use cases that people are applying it to. In the current supply chain process, a supply chain analyst is faced a question, why is my supplier contract, is this supplier contract different? Why is this order coming from a different port than I expected it to? All kinds of questions they might be asking. They're going to have to go and look across various disparate data sources. They might look up that transaction in ERP. They're going to go find the supplier contract. They might compare it to other supplier contracts. They might have to look up the bill of materials to understand what this impacts downstream. And then ultimately, they also are going to consult with people who are experienced, seasoned professionals that they work with if they don't have as much experience with these types of issues. As a result, it takes them hours, days, weeks to come up with the answer to various types of questions and to keep things on track. With C3 Generative AI for supply chain, however, supply chain teams can interact with the C3 Generative AI application, which is providing them access to all of their supply chain data, all of their information in one place, and they no longer have to pull together that information for themselves, but rather have a single source of truth that they can then go and start their workflows. Justin will show a demo of this in action in a second, but again, this helps supply chain teams ask the most relevant questions that allows them to provide very seamless access across all of their enterprise applications that are integrated. This does not just apply to the C3 supply chain suite applications like C3 AI inventory optimization, which it absolutely is integrated with, but it also pulls that information from, again, that whole supply chain digital twin, which is integrating data from existing ERPs, from existing planning software, regardless of who the provider is. So if you're using SAP and Oracle and Blue Yonder and Kinaxis and all of the different planning tools, this application, the C3 Generative AI application, can pull and query data from across those source systems. I mentioned that access controls are really important for our users. So I'm just going to walk through this quick example of how this works in action. As a user, so let's say I'm a supply chain analyst, I submit a query. Again, how much inventory do I have at my distribution center? Now, the way I phrase that, maybe I'm using different language. I'm not going to ask the same query every time. People just don't, right? Humans interact in very colloquial text. So the large language model converts that into a query that gets passed to the retrieval model. But if I ask that question and I only have access to some of the data sources, the response I get will be different. So in this example, as a supply chain analyst, I might only have access to document 1, the application data 2, application data 3, but I don't have access to document 2. Maybe this is a private legal contract or a commercial contract that as a supply chain analyst, I'm not on the commercial team, I don't have access to that. And I don't have application data. Maybe I don't have access to CRM data. And so I actually don't know what were the different transactions that we had with downstream customers. So as a result, the retrieval model will return an answer, but it's only based on the data that I have access to. And furthermore, the evidence it provides, the ground truth it provides, will tell me exactly where that data is coming from. So in that way, we are making sure that data privacy and access control limits are respected across not only C3 Generative AI, but also all C3 AI applications where we apply access control limits. So finally, I'll end on a case study where we have a C3 Generative AI for supply chain deployment with one of our supply chain customers. So this is a large agricultural producer who's using the C3 supply chain suite and our applications to make their supply chain more efficient in order to optimize and predict what's coming and reduce the variability in order to improve their on-time and full rates and service levels to their customers. So the problem they faced is that they had a variety of data sources that, again, supply chain analysts were having a hard time collating and understanding, synthesizing to make good decisions. So over the course of a 6-month pilot, which is how we typically get started with a new customer in a new use case, we unified data from what's called here unclassified data sources. So this is data that the entire enterprise had access to, Anyone could access publicly, like news articles, public statements from the company, fact sheets about their products and their services. And then we also unified their quote unquote classified data sources. So this is internal, privately protected IP and data where the access controls are really important. So that's things like test result documents, test descriptions, and the raw and process test data. So as this agricultural producer is testing their final product, making sure that it is meeting the quality and the yield expectations, pulling in that unified data into the C3 Generative AI for supply chain application. And as a result, these users are able to ask text-based questions, ask for references, query things like, how many of my batches met my expected target performance? Am I able to ship on time for this order ID? And the application returns charts and graphs to summarize the test results and provides ranked list of additional search results so that they can, again, go into, for example, the lab information system, LLMs, and kind of investigate in more detail, or go straight to the fact sheets and product data sheets to understand what are the requirements that matter to this particular product and test. So with that, I'm really excited to turn over to Justin Kendig, my colleague, to provide a demo of C3 Generative AI and C3 supply chain products in action.
Awesome. Thank you, Lila. All right, let's switch over to the live demo and see some software based on what Lila just described. All right, so as you heard Lila describe this, there's a lot of questions, and we as humans naturally just ask a lot of questions. And what I have found in the supply chain profession is you fall into two camps. You're either the leader, the manager, the VP who is asking questions about your supply chain. Why did this happen? What should we do next? What's going on over here? What's our best practice? Where am I failing the most? Or you're in the other camp of you're the one that's being asked the question and you have to figure out, how am I going to answer this? And there's frustration on both sides. The leaders are saying, how come I can't get this question answered faster? And on the other side, it's, why are you asking so many questions? These are very detailed. So the ability to be able to have that Google interface, as I'm about to show you, and be able to say, hey, I don't know what my questions are going to be. I just want to be able to start my day, figure out, here's a situation, I get an email, whatever it is, I see something, I want to be able to ask a question. And then it's not just the first question that you want to be able to ask, it's then those follow-up questions and the drill downs and the next question. And so that's what I'm about to show you. So when we look at our generative AI and our enterprise search applied to our applications, you start to see, so let me navigate you, you've got a Google-like interface. And so start my day and I want to say, what is my current global supplier performance? And so very quickly, it comes back and it says, hey, your global on time and full performance over the last 2 months is 82%. Now, let's also see what it is. I can see there's documents, there's news articles, there's images, videos. I can put context into this. I can also see other search results along with the initial one about, supplier details, performance evaluations. Again, this is tapping into your enterprise data to be able to pull back what's the relevant information for that. Along with then what people also ask. So what are other variations, as Lila was describing, of that same question? Well, so great. Now I know what my global performance is. Let's say I'm the North American manager. I want to know what my performance is of my suppliers coming in to North America. And so I can say which suppliers are worst performing in North America. So I type that up, answer it, and then I quickly get a list of here are the top 10 worst performing suppliers. So what's their name? What's their on time and full of the suppliers delivering into my network? Where are they located? What's the supplier city? But then I also in the search results see, all right, the top supplier is Bearing Distributors. This one has the lowest on time and full. I can also see that there was a supplier performance evaluation. And so that evaluation may be in PDF. I can then click on it. The search results came back. They found, and I can go through and see, okay, here was this company. It was when it was evaluated, what their quality was, who the evaluators were. I can get that information very quickly to now see, all right, what do I know about this particular supplier? Or I can drill in and go to information pages or other information that's available. But now I really want to know, okay, what do I need to worry about today with bearing distributors? So which purchase orders are at risk for bearing distributors? So now I open this up and it tells me there are 3 active purchase order lines. Where is their destination, the requested delivery date, the predicted delivery date? Again, this is just going in to the data that's pulled into our supply chain digital twin and saying, all right, these 3 are now predicted to be delayed. So we have a model, a machine learning model within our supply network risk that is predicting the day that a purchase order line is placed until when it's actually going to arrive. And every single day it's updating. And so 2 of these are predicted to be delayed and 1 of them's already delayed. But now I can also go see, all right, what are those purchase orders? So I can open this up. Maybe this is opening up your Oracle instance, your SAP. Maybe you have these in PDF forms. You can now start to see, okay, this is a yaw motor. Here's who I am that's ordering it, where I'm ordering this from. So again, just pulling all that information along with, other item details that you want to order, or you can jump into that particular order line and get more information. So now I'm navigating into our supply network risk application where it starts to show this particular order line for an item, a yaw motor. It's coming from this supplier going to my facility in Joliet. Okay, but before I jump into here, that was me asking questions about my performance and ultimately getting to an individual purchase order line. Now, I could also jump back and go in the more traditional route from our C3 AI applications. We start off with overview pages where you can start to see configurable key performance indicators, such as how many open purchase order lines do I have? What percentage of my order lines are delayed, predicted to be on time? What's my overall supplier performance? Then you can start to see what's my open purchase order lines. Have I been improving? Am I getting worse? But ultimately you can then start to prioritize, if I want to move the needle on my supplier performance, which supplier should I work on? Or maybe there are certain items that I should be focusing attention on that are causing my performance issues. Or maybe there's a specific facility. Again, prioritize your work to figure out how am I going to improve my supplier on time and full performance. The other available option is that, say you're a planner, it's a material planner, an inbound planner, maybe you're in charge of a specific facility or a group of products, maybe it's a set of suppliers. You can filter down and then see an alert-driven workflow allows you to see what are the purchase order lines that are predicted to be delayed. So now you can come in each day and start to see these things pop up on your list, start to go work on them, prioritize by value, how many days they're predicted to be late, along with then other contextual information. And then you can drill into those purchase order lines. So now I've taken it from asking questions and getting into a specific purchase order line detail, or I can go in from a prioritized standpoint and those 2 different workflows merge though into the same location of what do I need to do about this particular purchase order line. So now that I'm drilled into this order line, I can see it's predicted to be delayed by 10 days. I can see general information. I can also see activity feed. So this is all the information that was fed into the machine learning model from various milestones. So the day order was created, when it was accepted, when the carrier picked it up from the supplier, when it arrived at the port of origin, and then now it's on a vessel, and so it's been departed. But then sometime after the vessel departed, the AI model predicted that it was going to start to be delayed. So now I want to dive in and understand what is the machine learning model telling me. So I go into my AI explainability to go look at the evidence package. I'm going to turn off some of this to start to see and explain what's going on. So I'm in this purchase order line, and over time, because every single day our machine learning models are running for all of your open purchase order lines. I can see the expected lead time was going to be 45 days. And when originally it was created, the machine learning models were predicting that this particular order was going to arrive early. And then eventually it got a little bit more delayed, And then about a week ago, it started to predict, oh, you're going to start being late. And so now we're at the point where we're 10 days late. What I want to understand, though, is in the hundreds of features that are going into this model, how do I categorize them? And that's what these color components start to bring in, is we have grouped features together into these different areas called quantity, network, time, allocation, demand, and those help you to start to understand where are the problems within your network, at least for this particular order that are causing the delay. Another feature I can look at as I scroll down is I can go pull up any past model. So I said the machine learning model is running every single day. Well, I can go back in time to understand what were the features saying, what were the contributions. And so as I look at the feature contribution, I can see that this network category is causing the biggest amount of contribution to my delay. Well, what does network mean? So as I read through this, through our insight cards, you can start to see that the lead times between milestones for similar orders has increased by 22% over the last 6 months. So over this time, maybe you didn't see it in like a single event, but it started to happen over time. You started to see these increase. Well, what are all the features that make that up? So now these are the individual features that make up the machine learning model. Port-to-port lead time, terminal delivery, supplier promise delivery changes. I can see what a description is of all those features, what the value is, and then what the contribution. And so the whole goal of this explainability, or our, what we call our evidence package, is to open up that black box that is a machine learning model or an AI model and start to explain this in layman's terms so that everyone can start to understand and you can start to learn, all right, port-to-port lead times, something's happening with my vessels that's probably going to impact more of your network than just this one purchase order line. So now I understand a lot more about what's going on with this model, why it's predicting what it is. So now let's go dive in and see what can I do about it. Are there actions? So I've predicted that it's going to be delayed ahead of time. Now I want to start to take action and see what some of my options are. So I'm going to switch over to a more global view to understand, physical premise. Where is this container? Where is this particular order line at today? So I can quickly see here was the supplier over in China, the port of origin, the container, because we're tracking, as Lila said, all of the AIS data, so we can track where vessels are around the world. So I can see where that container is at. I can see the port of destination, and then I can see the final destination over here in Joliet. If I look at this particular container, I can start to get information about here's the port, here's the destination, but I see that this container, so my transportation team has this container as a low priority. What I can do though is we can work with all of our customers and we can configure various recommendations. One of them might be, you may have a different option for port processing priority. So maybe I want to increase the priority of this container, and then I can see, because the predictive model has learned that if you change this from low to high, I can shave 2 days off of my processing time. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to change this up to high. I'm going to accept that. And what that did is not only did it change it in our application, because of the bidirectional integration and the ability for all of our APIs to write, we now push this out to your transportation team. They now have awareness. And so you're making this more efficient for your supply chain teams to work together. I want to look at some other options for what can I do about this. So now I'm going to zoom in on my actual facility of where it's going. I can see, where's the location. It's over in Joliet. I can see there's a stockout risk on this yaw motor that's part of this purchase order line. And I can see that there are a couple options. There are containers that have been sitting around for a while, one in Houston and then one in LaGuardia. And so I can start to look at those. I can see one would reduce it by 6 days, my stockout time, one by 10 days. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this one from LaGuardia. I'm going to basically accept it here in the application. That will write out to your system. And what it'll do is it'll start to reroute that container and say, all right, send this one to Joliet because I need to avoid a stockout risk. And so whether it's containers with inventory, whether it's other facilities with inventory, we're pulling in those network views and we can configure these recommendations so you can start to take action. So let's go back and summarize. What we saw was we started by asking questions. And then through the applications, I started to get more and more detailed information about what are my problems. And I started to see problems that were about to happen. And then the C3 AI suite of applications then provided you with recommendations for how to mitigate those problems before they become an actual problem within your supply chain. So I will turn this now over to Keaton, and we will start our Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Justin and Lila, for the great presentation and demo. For the audience, please continue to use the Q&A window for questions that you want to ask. We'll start off with a few questions. The first one is for Lila. What's the difference between C3 AI and Power BI? Is C3 AI just an enhanced version of Power BI?
Yeah, great question. As I think became evident in Justin's demo, the C3 AI supply chain applications are not just an enhanced version of Power BI. These are fully workflow-enabled applications that address primary business needs and are specifically tailored to specific business personas. So the demo that Justin just shared is really focused on an order manager to keep orders on track and make sure that there are not ensuing delays for things like manufacturing or for customer delivery. We have similar application workflows, and I urge all attendees to watch our explainer videos or follow up with us for additional demos for our inventory optimization application, demand forecasting, sourcing optimization, and production schedule optimization. What generative AI does is it provides users with a new interface to ask questions and get easy access to the information that they need. So if there is information that is already integrated to the C3 AI supply chain digital twin or to their into their application instance, then they can start to ask more natural language questions that traditionally would require additional reporting or pulling data in order to run a query. So instead, it's providing a more natural language interface to allow you to ask more free-form questions. But ultimately, neither are, in my mind, at all similar to Power BI or business reporting dashboards. Really, they are, number one, providing end-to-end user-driven workflows, and number two, providing a more natural language interface to access information.
Great. Thank you, Lila. Justin, we have a question for you. The question asks, I've already made significant investments in advanced planning and scheduling supply chain solutions. Can C3 AI generate enough ROI to justify investing in another tool?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I actually think the need for investing into more process-driven solutions in advanced planning is absolutely critical. But where those applications start to fall short is the ability to make operational decisions using advanced AI, ML, and optimization. And what we have seen with many of our customers is when they go in, they do those investments, and then we come in and sit in parallel and help to enhance those solutions, is we can see demand forecast increase of 10 to 20% in accuracy improvement. We can see reductions of inventory around 35 to 50%. We can see reductions in sourcing costs of upwards of 10%. And we can ultimately, as you're focused on your customers, see on-time and full order fulfillment increases of around 20%. So that's on top of the investments that you've already made. Those are coming in because the artificial intelligence, because the machine learning models have been specifically applied, along with then some of the alert-based workflows that we sit on top of your advanced planning solutions. They can start to enhance and definitely provide that ROI needed to make it worth it.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Lila, we have a question for you. We just saw Justin provide a demo on Gen AI with SNR, or C3 AI Supply Network Risk. Lila, will other C3 AI supply chain applications have C3 Generative AI capabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. We are incorporating C3 Generative AI into all of our C3 AI applications. We also sell C3 Generative AI as a standalone product. We will configure the search interface and ability to chat with the LLM and query the underlying data. The C3 Generative AI product can be deployed on its own, or it can be co-deployed and is part of all of our other C3 AI applications. So if you choose to pursue C3 AI inventory optimization or C3 AI supply network risk, those applications come out of the box with C3 Generative AI. The difference is really what are the data that are incorporated, and are you applying the predictive models that are inherent to those other applications as well as those end user workflows. So it really depends on the business problem that you need to solve.
Thanks, Lila. Justin, we have a question for you. Can C3 Generative AI populate results with different graphs based on the prompt that you ask?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'll go back to a little bit of the first time I was introduced to generative AI as our teams were starting to show it to us. And we learned that if you ask a question about where something happens, it pulls up a map, because the models are smart enough to know that if you want to ask where, it's going to bring you a map. And so I've seen, we're going to get more mature in this. Everyone's getting more mature. I've seen, different bar charts, line charts. I've seen maps. I've seen Sankey diagrams can be generated. Obviously the maps I talked about. So yeah, it's really cool, the power that can be generated and the way that information can be shared. And what's really cool is that the application will start to present you with that data in the best way that it should be presented. And it'll continuously learn over time and get better at how should it present the results to specific questions that are answered. And so really excited to see where this is going to go as we continue to enhance it and make it even better.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Lila, a question for you. How long does implementation take?
Yeah, we usually get started with customers with 3 to 6 month pilot projects. Over the course of that 3 to 6 month pilot, we will integrate the data required for the use case. Now, again, if it's just a generative AI use case, then we are integrating unstructured data, some structured data, and configuring that search interface. If we are deploying a C3 AI supply chain application, that also involves training the predictive models and the optimization models, configuring the end user workflow, such that at the end of the 3 to 6 month period, you have a live production application with users that have access to getting started, immediately. So it just depends on which use case is selected to decide if it's a 3 or 6 month project.
Great. Justin, a question for you. Can C3 Generative AI be applied to my existing supply chain solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. And by tapping it into those databases, as Lila is showing, you can start to pull those results in and start to query, whether it's your planning systems, whether it's your Power BI systems, your Tableau, Click, whatever your reporting systems are. And you can take whatever you've invested in today, start to bring that data in and start to query questions against it, and it'll present it back to you the way you want to. So absolutely, you can get started, and then it gets enhanced even more as you start to bring in some of the C3 AI supply chain suite of applications as well.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Lila, the next question is for you. It relates to data. So how does C3 Generative AI prevent data exfiltration? Can you speak a little bit about what happens when there are gaps in supply chain data?
Yeah, so 2 questions. One on data exfiltration, which is where I will start. As I presented in the slides, we actually prevent the LLM from accessing our customer data. So the LLM is a trained deep learning model that knows how to interpret and synthesize, human language, but it doesn't know anything about your data. And so what that LLM is doing is it's simply understanding what is the intent of the question, what information are you looking for, and passes that to the retrieval model. Because the LLM doesn't ever have access to the enterprise data, it never learns from it. It doesn't become expert about your operations, your supply chain. It doesn't actually know anything about your suppliers, your inventory, your distribution, your manufacturing facilities. So there's no information it has that it could be exposed to providing out into the world. So that is a really important part of our architecture that prevents all of those downsides of standard LLM architecture. The second question you asked is, how does it overcome data gaps? I'll answer in 2 ways. So first is, if there's a gap in the data, and we're just talking about the search-based interface, I ask a question, I'm looking for a response. If that data doesn't exist, again, the retrieval model will return no data in the query, and then it presents basically an empty array, and the LLM will say, okay, my response is, I don't have data. I don't know how to answer that question. And we've tested this countless times. If you ask a question that C3 Generative AI doesn't have an answer to, the LLM will respond, I don't know. We don't have access to that information. So that's one part of the answer. The second is, well, what if I really need that data to make better decisions? I need to know if how much inventory I have at my different distribution centers. What if that data is missing? And all of our applications come with pre-built pipelines that address different types of problems, and data gaps is a really common problem we run into all the time. We address that by handling uncertainties. So we know that if we see an outlier where maybe there is a missing data entry point where it looks like inventory is 0, but all of the previous data was, inventory of 10,000 units, we might treat that as an outlier and then smooth over it. There's other types of missing data handling techniques that we use. We also apply similarity for things like demand forecasting. So, if you have no data, it's new product introduction. If you're missing data from sales, we can handle that with similarity to other products. There's a number of different approaches that we take depending on the type of missing data that we're talking about when applied to specific predictive problem or specific type of insight that we're generating. So again, it depends on whether or not you're asking, how do you handle missing data, whether it's, search-based, I'm just trying to query and get access to that data and it's missing, we'll say we don't have access to the data. But if it's about a predictive model and a supply chain workflow, then yes, we do have ways to overcome those data gaps so that you can still get really good insight from your data that you do have.
Great. Well, thank you, Lila and Justin. That's all the time that we have today. As a quick reminder, this webinar will be available on demand and you will receive an email with the link later today. If you enjoyed today's content, please follow C3 AI on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.